Karen ripped out my son's hearing aid. I'm the federal disability compliance chief. My son had just taken his first confident steps into middle school new shoes, a new backpack, and the same hearing aid that's helped him hear my voice since he was 3. And that morning, for the first time, he told me he didn't need me to walk him to the bus stop. I should have followed my instinct. We had moved to Juniper Heights only 3 months ago. A safe neighborhood, the realtor said. Tight-knit, great for families. I'd taken a new assignment with the Department of Justice Disability Rights Division. My job was quiet but critical. I conducted surprise audits at government-funded facilities to ensure accessibility and compliance. We just wanted peace. We got Karen instead. It started with notes, typed, unsigned, folded neatly in our mailbox. Children should not wear devices at the pool. Your son made disruptive beeping sounds near the dog park. At first, we laughed. Then came the glares, the whispering. And finally, the day Karen stepped in front of my son, blocked his path, and snatched the hearing aid off his ear. Neighborhoods like this don't allow electronic surveillance, she sneered. Tell your mother to get that government thing out of here. He was 12. He screamed. When I got the call from the school nurse, my blood turned to ice. He's okay, she said, but someone needs to talk to the neighbor lady. He was trembling, and the hearing aid is broken. Karen. I knew the name but not the depth. I came home early, cradling my son's small, shaking shoulders. Why did she call me defective? Mom, he asked, and I couldn't answer. All I could do was promise him that justice was coming, because this time, it wasn't just my son's dignity, it was the law. Karen Voss. I finally learned her last name the evening after the hearing aid incident. It was scribbled on a letter slid under our door. A formal warning typed in Comic Sans, no less stating we had violated HOA Rule number 9 to 14, no non-conforming wearable electronics in public spaces. It was signed Karen Voss, Chairwoman, Juniper Heights Community Compliance Board, except there is no such rule. I should know. There's no law in this state, municipal, zoning, or HOA that bans assistive devices. In fact, under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, interfering with such a device is a civil rights violation, and I'd spent a decade of my life ensuring those rights were protected. But Karen didn't know that. Not yet. I wasn't angry. Not at first. I was focused, cold. I documented everything: photos of the damaged hearing aid, screenshots of her compliance letters, and my son's written statement complete with a drawing of her red nails and the words, "She yelled and called me spyware." His handwriting wobbled with hurt. I knocked on 3 doors that night. First, our neighbor, Mr. Greeley. He answered with tired eyes and a beer in hand. "Oh, I'm Karen," he sighed. "Yeah, she's been running this fake HOA ever since the original dissolved last year. The board quit after a lawsuit, some privacy thing. But she never stopped." "You mean she doesn't have authority?" I asked. He snorted. "She's got a clipboard and a printer. That's it. Everyone just lets her bark. Easier that way." Easier. That word haunted me. Was it easier when she mocked the boy with Down syndrome at the playground last month, or when she told the wheelchair user on Maple Lane that ramps attracted vagrants? I had quietly tracked these incidents online in local forums. Posts tagged Mach Juniper Karen and Mach fake HOA popped up like weeds. I reached out to one Jessica Tran, a mother of 2. Her child used a speech device. Karen had taken it away during a block party and announced, "Kids should use their mouths like everyone else." Jessica cried on the phone. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just a one-off. This was systemic. Karen wasn't just enforcing non-existent rules, she was using the illusion of authority to harass the vulnerable. Disabled kids, immigrants, elderly. She didn't wear a badge, but she wore control like armor. And it was time someone cracked that armor wide open. The next day, I called in a favor. "Raj, it's Rachel. I need unofficial eyes on a housing complaint. Juniper Heights, fake HOA, possible ADA violations." Raj Singh was a fellow inspector at HUD. We'd worked together during a brutal public housing case in Arizona. He didn't ask questions. You want a shadow visit or full documentation? He asked. Shadow? Let's see how deep this goes. By Friday, he was in town, posing as a prospective buyer. I gave him a mic and a camera pen. We walked the neighborhood, Raj pretending to admire the hedges while Karen followed us like a mall cop. You'll find our community very exclusive, she cooed. We have standards. We monitor who moves in and what they bring. Like hearing aids, Raj asked casually. Karen didn't flinch. Well, yes. We try to maintain acoustic purity. It's a wellness initiative. Acoustic purity. I recorded every syllable. That evening, a neighbor handed me an envelope. No name. Inside was a photocopy of Karen's rulebook, 20 pages of fake bylaws she passed around like scripture. It banned electric scooters on sidewalks, prohibited foreign-sounding music, and limited visible assistive technology, each one a potential civil rights violation. Karen had turned our neighborhood into a pocket dictatorship. But now, I had proof. I reached out to two more parents, a veteran with a service dog and a single mom whose son used a feeding tube. Both had stories. Both were ready to testify. We weren't just fighting Karen anymore. We were fighting the fear she'd created, the culture of silence, the neighbors who said it's easier. But what's easier rarely brings justice. And I wasn't here for easy. I was here for the law. The thing about people like Karen is that they don't start with hate. They start with control. And when I finally pulled the thread on her fake authority, the whole fabric of her self-made empire began to unravel. It began with a name I hadn't heard yet, Douglas Voss, Karen's ex-husband. A quick search through county records showed they had jointly owned 5 parcels in Juniper Heights until he suddenly quit-claimed all of them to her 18 months ago. Odd timing, considering the original HOA was officially dissolved only a few months later. That wasn't a coincidence. It was a land grab. I dug deeper. With Raj's help, I traced a paper trail of donations Karen had solicited from neighbors under the guise of community improvement fees. There were no public accounts, no bank disclosures, just Venmo payments to a personal profile labeled HOA HQ and a mailing address, her garage. That alone was enough for an IRS whistleblower form. But then came the twist that made my blood run cold. Karen had applied for a federal grant. Specifically, she applied for ADA accessibility funding, a program I help audit. She submitted forged documentation, photoshopped ramps and modified interiors of neighborhood homes, claiming she was bringing inclusivity to the private housing sector. That's why she was so obsessed with visibility. She didn't want disabled kids to exist in the neighborhood. She wanted them as proof to get money, and then pretend they weren't there. She was using disabled children, my son, as evidence for funding, and then publicly shaming them. This wasn't just harassment. This was federal fraud. I met with my sister that night, Alyssa. She's a civil rights attorney in D.C., and though we rarely mixed family and federal, I needed her strategic brain. She faked inclusion to collect checks, while enforcing exclusion in real life, Alyssa muttered, reading the fake ADA compliance packet I'd printed. This could be wire fraud, misrepresentation, ADA violations, even civil conspiracy. She looked up. You still want to take her down administratively? I paused. No, I said. I want to tear down the system that lets people like her thrive. We drafted a case file, a massive one, statements from families, video of Karen harassing children, screenshots of Venmo payments and HOA fines, copies of her fake rule books, an internal DOJ memo linking her to the fraudulent grant. It was enough to trigger not just local investigation but federal. But I knew she'd fight back, so I needed to rally the people she hurt, not just as witnesses, as a resistance. I called Jessica Tran and asked her to meet at the old gazebo in Central Park, just beyond Karen's jurisdiction. We met with 7 families' parents of disabled kids, veterans, caretakers. One even brought their child's therapy aide. We passed out coffee, case printouts, and a plan. Karen's power isn't real, I told them. She survives because people think speaking up won't work. Jessica nodded. It's time we proved her wrong. We started organizing. Quietly, we launched a private support network, then a public online campaign. Yamashimau exposed Juniper Karen. Stories flooded in. Anonymous at first, then bolder. Louder. Named. One neighbor posted a doorbell cam of Karen screaming at a child's cochlear implant. Another shared a voicemail where she mocked a mother for raising a cyborg. Within 24 hours, the hashtag was trending locally. Then it hit national attention. A disability advocacy group reposted our story, then a veterans nonprofit, then a retired senator quote tweeted, "Someone get the DOJ on this fake HOA dictator." I didn't respond, because I was the DOJ. But Karen wasn't going down without a fight. She started showing up to homes, clipboard in hand, issuing emergency citations. She called the sheriff's office 3 times in 1 week to claim domestic surveillance devices were violating community privacy mandates. One of those devices, a 7-year-old's glucose monitor. When deputies refused to act, she upped her game trespassing onto porches, yelling at parents at the school bus stop. But the real moment of truth came when she tried to shut down a community playgroup hosted by a child with cerebral palsy. She stood in front of the gate with a megaphone and shouted, "This is not a care facility. You people need to go," but this time, the kids' parents were ready. 3 of them filmed the entire meltdown. One calmly said, "You are interfering with a federally protected support gathering." Another called the local news. And the third, she was a county ADA officer in uniform. Karen froze. The video hit 2 million views in under 48 hours. Her mask of authority finally cracked. That night, I received a call from a DOJ senior official in D.C. "We just opened a formal investigation," he said. "And Rachel, we'd like you to lead it." They came in black government Suburbans, not sirens, not spectacle, just quiet efficiency. The neighbors peeked through blinds as a federal task force, led by DOJ's Civil Rights Division, stepped onto Juniper Heights soil. Agents in suits, federal ADA officials, 2 IRS investigators. I recognized each badge. I had briefed half of them, and I, Rachel Moore, was no longer hiding. I stood on my own driveway in full badge and DOJ windbreaker, holding my son's broken hearing aid in one gloved hand. This time, I wasn't just a mother, I was the law. 2 weeks earlier, after the community meltdown went viral, the dominoes began to fall. Karen tried to save face. She posted a rambling Facebook video from her garden, holding a teacup and claiming disinformation campaigns were targeting her organic neighborhood initiative. She said she was being bullied for enforcing community wellness and insisted she'd never snatched any medical equipment from a child. She called us actors. She called my son a weaponized narrative, but it was too late. The damage was done and documented. One by one, her supporters began to defect. Mr. Greeley, who once brushed her off as annoying, stepped forward with photos of Karen's forged HOA envelopes. Jessica Tran brought forward a signed compliance agreement Karen had tricked her into signing by saying it was a school fundraiser. And Rajhi delivered the final nail, a report cross-checking the so-called HOA's bylaws with local and federal law. Not a single one was valid. Worse, many directly violated federal accessibility statutes, including the ones Karen had cited when she ripped my son's hearing aid off. We had her. But justice wasn't a Facebook comment war. Justice meant accountability. On the morning of the raid, Karen wasn't home. She was at the community clubhouse hosting a Patriots of Property seminar. She stood at the podium with her signature clipboard and mic headset, lecturing half a dozen hand-picked neighbors about sovereign communities and freedom from overreach. Then the door opened. The room fell silent as 2 federal agents entered. Calm, direct. "Karen Voss," one said. "We're with the Department of Justice. We have questions regarding disability fraud, misrepresentation of federal grant programs, and obstruction of civil rights." Karen's mic squealed as she stepped back. "You're harassing a private citizen," but this time nobody stood with her. Someone in the back, Mr. Alvarez, whose son used a wheelchair, stood up. "I thought you were protecting us," he said quietly. "But you were just protecting yourself." The agents didn't raise their voices. They didn't have to. Karen was escorted out of the clubhouse in stunned silence. The clipboard dropped to the floor with a dull clack. Back home, the neighborhood had gathered in stunned clusters. Some cried, some whispered, some looked relieved. I walked past them and met the lead ADA attorney by the Voss residence. "You still want to handle the direct interview?" he asked. I nodded. She didn't just break the law. She broke people. The interview lasted hours. Karen denied most things, blamed assistants, claimed her donation records were lost in a flood. She said she was advocating for safe spaces, not banning medical devices. She wept when asked why she forged documents for the federal grant, then said it was her right as a community leader. When we presented the children's testimonies, she laughed until the IRS agent handed her a subpoena. That wiped the smirk off her face. Over the next 2 weeks, we froze Karen's accounts. The IRS initiated a full audit. DOJ filed formal charges of fraudulent use of federal funds, civil rights interference under the ADA, impersonation of legal authority, emotional endangerment of minors with disabilities. Neighbors came forward in waves, some confessing they'd felt bullied into silence, others just thankful it was over. But the best part, the hearing aid company, whose product Karen destroyed, offered to sponsor a new device for my son for free. They even named a local fund in his honor to support other children targeted for their disabilities. The fake HOA was disbanded in full view of the county, the bylaws shredded, and the sign Karen had installed on the clubhouse private property, HOA enforcement zone, was pulled down by the city themselves. Underneath was the original metal plaque, long covered up, Juniper Heights Community Center, SD 1978, for all. But I didn't stop there. With the momentum we had, I worked with DOJ and the Department of Education to create a national toolkit for recognizing and reporting fake HOA discrimination, especially those targeting children with disabilities. Our team published real HOA compliance guidelines, and community members across the country began posting them proudly on their doors. "You have rights here. All abilities welcome." Karen is awaiting trial now. She's been charged, sued, fined, and shamed. But strangely, I don't feel triumph. What I feel is clarity, because the real win wasn't just in the takedown, it was in what came after. There's a quiet that settles after justice, something different than peace. Not the silence of fear, not the hush of being watched, but something fuller, like exhaling after months of holding your breath. That was Juniper Heights in the weeks after Karen's arrest. For the first time, the neighborhood sounded alive. Children rode bikes again, some with training wheels, some with prosthetics. Wheelchair ramps were no longer hidden behind bushes. My son, Caleb, stood at the school bus stop without clutching his backpack like a shield. And he wore his new hearing aid with pride, sleek, custom fit, etched with his favorite comic logo. He told me he wanted to start a club for kids who get stared at, but do cool stuff anyway. He called it the Super Sound League. After the takedown, the community didn't fall apart, it woke up. The clubhouse, once Karen's personal podium, was reopened under a volunteer-led coalition. Jessica Tran co-chaired it with Mr. Alvarez. They rewrote the entire neighborhood code, not with punishments, but with protections. Instead of HOA fines, we created hope notices, helping others with positive encouragement. Each one celebrated a neighbor's contribution: gardening, accessibility upgrades, mentoring. We also created the Juniper Advocacy Fund, seeded with restitution funds from Karen's frozen accounts. The money went directly toward adaptive tech for kids in need. The very devices Karen once tried to erase were now the badge of honor for the new community spirit. But not everyone accepted change easily. One afternoon, I found a note in our mailbox, sloppily handwritten, unsigned. "Your kind always turns communities into activist hellholes. Not every disability deserves a stage." For a moment, that old ache returned, the one that whispered, "Don't push too hard, just blend in. Make it easier." But then I saw my son helping his friend Tyrell, a nonverbal boy with a speech device, tie his shoes on our porch. And I remembered we didn't survive all this just to stay silent again. So I taped the note to the community board, right next to our new mission statement: "We don't exclude, we don't erase, we don't obey fake power." Then I added, and every child deserves a stage. A few months later, we were invited to speak at a National Disability Equity Summit in DR. See, the DOJ flew me out, but I told them I wouldn't go without Caleb. He took the mic before hundreds of officials, advocates, and educators, and with trembling hands, he said, "My hearing aid helps me hear my mom say she's proud. So if you don't like it, that's your problem, not mine." They gave him a standing ovation, and I cried, not just for my son, but for every child who had ever been told their existence was an inconvenience, for every veteran mocked for needing help, for every parent who stayed quiet out of fear. Karen Voss was eventually convicted on 3 felony counts and multiple civil violations. She accepted a plea deal, but part of that deal required a formal public apology to the families she harmed. She read it over Zoom. Her voice cracked halfway through. Not from shame, I think, but from the loss of control. And that's when I realized people like her don't fear punishment. They fear irrelevance. She'll never be in charge again. But we are. This story isn't just about one Karen. It's about a system that allows self-appointed power to go unchecked, especially when it targets the vulnerable. If you see injustice cloaked in fake authority, document it, expose it, stand up. If you're part of an HOA, demand transparency. If you're a parent, teach your child their rights are not negotiable. And if you've been silent because it's easier, ask who benefits from your silence. Because no community becomes truly strong until it chooses inclusion over intimidation. What would you do if someone like Karen ruled your block? Have you witnessed fake authority abuse where you live? Share your thoughts, and let's rewrite what community really means together.